the topic of this panel, AI in action. Hype, help, or hindrance? AI is everywhere, but does it help your business? In this no-fluff panel, we have Kate leading 4 experts talking about AI and how you can make it work in your business. Thank you, Kate.
My name's Kate Dodd. I'm the founder at Intent Strategy. So my background is in design, construction, and decision science strategy. So I provide fresh eyes and systems level perspective to business challenges, from talent management to leadership skills to physical and digital future of work programming. So I have today on our panel, we have Olga Papageorgiou, who is a partner at Oliver White Asia Pacific. Her background is in business and finance strategy in fast-moving consumer goods. She is a Krav Maga instructor and someone I was lucky enough to study alongside in a data science and AI strategy master's degree. We also have today Careen who is the founder of Humanea. Her background is in the people space, so building and leading global teams. She is very familiar with the daily juggle of managing people and running a business, and is the creator of both an AI product and a human community at Humanea that I love being a part of. And finally, we have JP, or John Paul Costales, who is the founder at Be Useful. He is a software engineer, a mentor and startup advisor, and owner of the most aggressively productive positive outlook. So for today's panel, we had a fairly extensive discussion about what the best use of structuring AI is. We could talk about technical stuff, we could try and sell stuff, or we could try and explain the basics of how to think about AI, how to understand how AI can work in business. So to start that, first question, and I will direct this to you, Olga. What are we talking about when we say AI? This can mean a lot of things, so what's the overview?
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, AI feels like it's a new term, right? You feel like every second sentence is about AI. You get approached by a new technology company, AI this, AI that, and it's like, what are we actually talking about? Well, AI has actually been with us for a very long time. The mathematics for AI has been around since the 50s, right? But it's only recently that our technology has caught up in order to realize the benefits of AI, and it has a very broad scope. But in general, what we're talking about is computer systems that can replicate human intelligence in the system. So think of anything that you do that is complex, that is more than just adding things together, like reasoning, predicting the future, those sorts of things. That's what we talk about when we think about AI. But what has happened recently is that AI has become a lot more accessible since ChatGPT arrived, and now everyone associates AI to mean ChatGPT. But it is much more than that, and large organizations have been using AI for many, many years, since the 90s, for predictive models and things like that. So it's a very broad term, but I think in terms of small business, we're thinking about any system that can help us do more complex reasoning and thinking in our business.
Well, I'll throw back to you, Careen, because what are the implications around that? What are the complexities? How are businesses meant to understand how that applies in today's business world?
Yeah, so I think in business, we have quite a few considerations when we think about adopting AI. So first of all, we have to understand that AI is going to amplify everything. So that can amplify bias, that can amplify dirty data that's in your system already. So what you want to do is understand that to use AI ethically and efficiently, you need to understand the data that you're putting into it. That's first off. Secondly, I would say that transparency is really important, especially if you're using it in your business, either with your customers, with your employees, with your vendors, etc. Being really transparent about how you're using and implementing AI, what decisions are you using AI to make. That transparency is really key to building trust. In Australia, we have one of the lowest adoption rates of AI globally, and I think that fundamentally comes down to that trust piece. And so as business owners, as leaders, we have to be transparent and create safe spaces within our work environments in that entire ecosystem so that other people feel safe to use the AI as well and understand what it's being used for. For example, I work in HR, and so people are worried that AI is going to take their job. They're worried it's going to make a decision about whether they get fired. Is it going to make a decision on what they get paid, their performance? And so as business owners, if you're using it in those contexts, you have to be really super transparent about what information you're getting from AI and how you're using that and what decisions are based on that.
So, JP, the premise of the panel, the question, is AI hype, help, or hindrance? Let's wrap it up.
So it's a great question. And first of all, thank you, Kate, for being on the panel. I've had the privilege of working with some amazing companies. So I've been in technology for 22 plus years, and for the last 10 years, I've worked to help startups and small businesses scale. So very, very lucky in terms of the timing for myself. Coming to Australia from Canada, I had the opportunity to work with, in the very early days, companies like Airtasker, like Canva, like Safety Culture, when they were really small startups, and they were, in the Sydney CBD, in some of the early startup scaling spaces. And it's really around, okay, what is AI? AI, as Olga said, has actually been around for a long time. Traditional AI with machine learning, with data, but it's only in the last 3 years, really with ChatGPT is probably the one that comes to mind for everybody. That in version 3.5 was only released 3 years ago. So that's it. So it seems like it's been around for a long time. Lovable, which is a coding tool that you can use, and they call it vibe coding, where you use natural language. That was literally released 1 year ago, so November of last year. And you probably heard a lot of people in AI land and LinkedIn kind of spruiking that. So when I think, as myself, a small business owner, what is AI? I think more, what can it do for my business? So what can it do? So as Careen very eloquently said, it can amplify things. So if you're hiring, it can help you to hire faster. If you're hiring, it can help you to hire better. If you're looking to scale your business, it can scale it in a smarter and kind of better way. But is it hype, help, or hindrance? It can actually be a little bit of all three. So where I've seen it be a hindrance, going to the very end, is if people just say, I need AI. Well, what does that mean? I need AI. AI is all around you. If you have one of these, then you already have AI, right? It can do so many things for you. It can be a hindrance if you just say, I need AI, and then you spend a bunch of money and you get some kind of solution that somebody's sold you on, but it doesn't actually solve a business need. So that's where it can be a hindrance. It can really help because I've seen companies completely transform their business. So if you have a digital business, for example, one of the companies I helped to scale before called Lendy, they're in the home loans business. They have a whole bunch of mortgage professionals. And literally at night, when they look at their schedule in the morning, they might have 4 or 5 calls. By the time they wake up, their AI chatbot has completely filled up their calendar. And they might have 20 calls and go, oh my goodness, what happened? Well, they have their AI chatbot talk to people at nighttime. They didn't know because maybe Channel 10 had a segment on everybody's getting ripped off. So they need to find a better mortgage rate. Amazing, they go online and all of a sudden, all of their mortgage brokers have their entire calendar filled up. And that is generative AI at its best, solving a real business need. So is it help, hype, or hindrance? It's a little bit of all three.
Thank you for that perspective. Careen, you touched on the idea of dirty data earlier. Ethics and security is obviously a huge concern for people. We hear that you need more data, that there's this huge investment in sourcing and storing more and more information, but also don't put your data into the system. How do you how should people think about that internal and external framework, and what does all of that mean?
So I always like to think about it as a control tower, and that's how I set everything up. And so it's understanding where the data is being stored. Is it being used to train models? And that really comes down to whenever you are looking at implementing AI, looking at the terms and conditions and the privacy statements of the tools and the models that you're looking at, and understanding, are they going to start training on everything that I'm querying? Where is my data stored? So those are quite fundamental things that I would say. When it comes to what data you're putting into them, so should I say data or data? Either. I'll keep changing. We'll keep it real. When it comes to internally, I'm going to give you an example of where you can create an algorithmic bias quite easily, and it's on the recruitment side. So I used to work for a tech company, and we hired software engineers. And the demographics in that team were pretty similar, but they were really different to the demographics in the HR team, for example. So if I then started training based on the historical data of each team, my AI would start thinking, well, a software engineer looks and sounds like this. A HR person looks and sounds like this. So that's me creating that algorithmic bias because I've trained the tool or the model that I'm using on historical data, which was already biased, okay? And so that's what we talk about with, in one sense, in that cleaning up the data. So for example, if I want to recruit using AI, I probably wouldn't use historical data unless I was 100% sure that there was no underlying bias in that data. What I would do is I would clean that up and I would create the data sets for that AI. That's one example of how I would do that. I think when we think about using AI internally, I touched on it before, it is about being transparent in how you're using it. For example, I'm a firm believer that AI should not be used to make decisions on hiring, firing, performance, or remuneration. I think a human has to always have that oversight. AI is great at pulling up the data, but we need that human in the loop to then make those decisions and to carry out those decisions. And I think that comes down to using AI ethically and understanding that it has a place, but it's not the whole part of the puzzle in organizations. And I think we're going to touch on that in a bit as well. So I will stop talking now.
No, I'm so much fun at dinner parties because data ethics is my favourite topic. No, it's something that I think, as I say, whenever people are talking about AI and getting wrapped up in the solutions, in the products, I always come back to that there's an entire philosophical argument about what to do with white spaces. So if you're filling out a form or capturing data and you accidentally put an empty white space at the end, that affects how the computer reads the data. The way that I explain it to my dad is to say, computer no think, computer only read digits. There's no, it's not that, it doesn't have the nuance to be able to disregard information. So, you know, there's the idea of null values is the other one. I get so excited about it. That if you've got two spreadsheets, has anyone ever tried to compare spreadsheets that were created by different people or by the same person at different times? Do they match ever? Yeah. So when you've got, and you're trying to get an algorithm, an AI machine learning product, to read information that is inherently mismatched and draw conclusions, it is getting better at finding those assumptions, but the complexity and the cleanliness of the data in that space means that you have to be much more thoughtful about what you're putting in. The counterside to that is that the tone and language and sales of the products are very comforting to us. The way that Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude speak to me makes me feel wonderful. It makes me trust it. Because if you want dating advice, it's sifting from the entirety of the internet, which has a lot of dating advice. So there's a lot of content to pull from that. But if you're asking for strategic business decisions for your organisation, do you want it pulling from that content? The machine learning programs can't create, right? They're only aggregating from past information and making informed assumptions and deliverables. So that coming back to the idea of inherent bias, if you want something created, you do need to use humans. In terms of neuroscience and that kind of space, the most advanced technologies we have are essentially fancy electrical plumbing. We don't know how the brain works, so we can't replicate it. So that doesn't mean that general intelligence, general artificial intelligence is impossible. It just means that it won't be human intelligence. And so making sure that we're not replacing but augmenting and using different tools. I can get an image generator to say, I want a unicorn on a sunset, and generate 500 different ways of doing that. And it will generate it in ways that I had not imagined. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't also have a person doing that and using the tools and getting a different way of contributing that information. But if anyone wants to talk about spreadsheets, white spaces, come and find me. So we did want to make sure that we touch on something practical. And in terms of the products, in terms of the sales, how is anybody meant to discern what they're getting, what they're being sold, what it will actually mean for their business? I know, Olga, this is something you're passionate about. Do you have top questions? What should you ask?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about this because when this was all starting to rear its head, I was in industry. And when you're working in a big organization that has lots of money, the software vendors are like, let's go get some of that IT budget, right? So we were getting bombarded with software vendors coming to us, telling us they had silver bullets to help us solve lots of different problems in our organization. And we didn't need to worry, we just needed to plug in our data and we'll get all the answers we need and we don't need to worry, right? And then when you started scratching the surface, holes started to appear, right? So I think the mindset we want to just keep when we're going to add technology layers into our organization is that you are now adding extra complexity into your organization. Because humans need to interact with this technology and they need to then make decisions about your business based on the outputs of that technology. So without really realizing it, you're adding extra layers of thinking and decisions in your business. So in order for us to navigate it, we started trying to create a checklist of things that we would ask organizations to help, because I couldn't police all the different technology decisions, so I started giving guides. And some of the basic questions you can start asking these organizations now that you have a little bit of general knowledge is, how did you train this? So going back to your point, if it's a HR tool, AI HR tool, and it was trained on all the data in the internet, and that's what they tell you, I would be very concerned because that is not being curated to deal with your specific problems. And then leading on to bias. If the technology provider can't give you an answer of how it will help you navigate bias in the outputs, big red flags, yeah? So just simple questions that start to push a little bit deeper around the thinking for how they've developed these tools is really important. So a bit around how they built it. And one of the questions I love asking, because when they start squirming, you know that you maybe have hit a nerve, can you please refer me to a client that is successfully using this application to solve this problem? And if they can't answer that question and give you a reference, don't buy it. That's my number one recommendation. But there are many more, and going back to your point around how do you store my data? How do you use my data? How do I make sure that it's not going to be compromised? How can you help train us? What is your capability around that? And the biggest one is, especially if your business is seeking to scale, how will you help us augment the way that this application is integrated into our business as my organization scales over time? Because what I have seen is smaller organizations adopt lots of little tools, and then as they bring more people in, they can't leverage that same technology stack when they now have like 100 people or 200 people and their business almost grinds to a halt. And you definitely don't want that happening in your organization. But there are many more, but those are a few that I would, and you're more than welcome to come see me after this to ask more questions about this sort of checklist, but those are a few of the key questions, and if they can't give you robust answers, send them back.
Can you publish that list on LinkedIn or something? Or can I buy it? That sounds like a good checklist to have. JP, I wanted to ask you particularly, as somebody who does an incredible amount of training courses and stays abreast of these things, in the time that we've been preparing this panel and thinking about this topic, like hundreds of new products, new companies, new innovations have arisen. how do you keep up? How can anyone pick a point in time to make a decision and commit to something, or without, being ahead of the game?
Yeah, this is a great question. The speed of change is just incredible now. So in 2025 here, a lot of the literature that I'm seeing is really around agentic AI, or using AI agents. So for those who don't know, AI agents are basically your generative AI, but you're giving it a set of instructions. So it's like a little worker for you. And you're saying, in the morning, I want you to do these sets of things. I want you to look at all the applications, for example, if you're hiring. I want you to go through our scorecard. I want you to then score them. I want you to, if they are very interesting, for you to be able to tell me about them and their top 5 qualities. And then you can have that as an email, and that agent is now kind of able to do that every single morning and stuff for you. So these things, it's good to know what the trends are, and you can go on, you mentioned LinkedIn, there's lots of newsletters that you can go on, but the number one thing that I would say is don't worry about the noise. Try to actually figure out what are your business problems, what are the biggest things that are a huge pain in the butt, for you, or your biggest opportunities, and then use generative AI, or talk to somebody like Olga or Careen over, and she's got a booth over there with Human Ear and Mac. What are these tools, and what can they do kind of for you, whether you have an issue on the HR side of things, or on the hiring side of things, or performance management, or if you're trying to get more customers. So with my business right now, I run a small business where I help other businesses get more customers to get their information and stuff out there. There are amazing tools out there now that go, here are your top 5 customers. Here's another 15 customers that are exactly like them. They have your budget. Wow, amazing. Now you can just go approach those 15 customers. So I've helped implement some of those things, and that you can do that today, right now. So it's really not just taking advantage of what is the latest tools, but how can you use the tools that people have already used now, and they have a proven way of using that to gain money for their business or gain some kind of operational advantage.
Still, pulling the trigger on making a decision and an investment is always a challenge, right? Even before this kind of really rapidly changing market, there's never the right time. There's never enough time to stop and think and make a decision and commit to something. And that's been an increasing trend over the last 15 years that I've been working with businesses, is that I call it decision hesitancy. But it's a de-risking. It's people are rationally concerned about making a commitment to something. So, Careen, with Human Ear and with Mac, how do you go about having that conversation? How should people know when the right time is to invest and commit? And how, is there trials? Like, how does that work from the product and developer side?
So I always suggest to businesses that when you are so stretched that you don't have time to do something, that's when you start looking at that. And the way that we work with businesses is we actually work with them to use best practice workflows in HR. So we actually give those to our customers, because that's where actually good AI starts, is the workflows. And then where does AI fit into those workflows? And so what I would say is, as a business, when you are thinking about technology, think about the workflows, think about best practice and what that looks like before you look at any tools, because that's actually going to be the differentiator of success. And so with us in Mac, we give that to people because that's how we know they can be successful. And back to your point, Olga, when you're speaking to vendors, ask them how they're going to support bringing AI into your workflows. Ask them, how do you train us? What do you give us to ensure that we are following best practice? And I think that that's something that we're really missing from a lot of these tech companies. They're selling tools, people are getting them, they're starting to use them. You get maybe a 20-30% uplift, but because you haven't got the deep knowledge of how the tool can work or how it can fit into your workflows, it almost feels like you're going round in circles. I don't know if anybody, if you use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you can feel after a certain point, you're like, I am just going round and round and round. And that usually comes down to the way that you're prompting. And so if you have training in doing more sophisticated prompting, you have a bit longer before you get to the end of that circle, and you have a bit more sort of depth to the outputs. And so it's the same with any tool you want to implement in your business. You need to have the support from the vendor to make sure that you can get those outputs that are going to be worthwhile and worth your time and money. Because AI is not a quick fix. It's an incredible amplifier, but it's not going to solve problems unless it's used correctly.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just taking notes for myself. One of the things, JP, that I mentioned your LinkedIn activity, this man has more micro-credentials than anyone I know. But to stay ahead of things, it's something that we talk about in large tech organizations, making sure that part of learning and development programs, isn't just the things that you click through once a year, or the, off-sites that you get to go to, but things that are actually practical tools. How has that landscape changed? Is it important? Who needs to do it? How do you keep up?
Yeah, again, great question, Kate. First of all, if you're here at this conference at Wexpo, you already are ahead of the game. So being able to be here, to be sitting at these things, I'm a huge conference person. I'm a meetup geek. There are a whole bunch of free ones. If you go to meetup.com, if you go to, there's one called Luma, lu.ma/Sydney, that you can go to. It has free things that you can go to that teaches you all about AI. So those are the ones in person. I believe I saw a TAFE stand here as well. TAFE New South Wales also has free courses that you can take online between 2 hours and kind of 2 days that you can train on AI, on generative AI, on machine learning, $400, $500 value that you can do for free. What Kate was talking about with the micro-credentialing for me is that I actually signed up for an online educator called Coursera, so coursera.org, and you can pay $80 or $100 for a course, and it could be a 2-month course, it could be a 2-week course, or even a 2-day course, and it's literally from the best organizations in the world. So I have a Google certification for leadership and generative AI. I have a certification from the University of Vanderbilt, which is amazing, the computer science side of things, for agentic AI. I actually have a certification for wellness and well-being from Yale University. So this is the course on happiness. And so I'm certified in happiness. So I think that's where Kate was pointing fun at me, is I actually have this on my LinkedIn that I am a certified coach in happiness from Yale University. So you can get these micro-credentials, and it's amazing. You get the exact lectures that people who are going on-site in Yale or at Harvard are getting, and you can get them online right now for a very, very small amount of money, or in the cases of TAFE and these other ones, for free. So it's a great way if you have a couple hours here and there, or even half an hour a day, you can go through these at your own pace. They have things that you have these assignments that you can do, and you can do them on your own time. So whether you're 8 years old or you're 80 years old, you can go through and you can learn these things at your own pace. And you can, with the videos, what's great is you can watch them again and again. You don't have to worry about questions. You don't have to worry about looking dumb. You can absolutely learn these things, and you can get them over time. So I think I've got 18, 19 or so, on there. And they're absolutely fantastic to learn, these micro learnings, and you can then ingest it and being able to use it, in your work.
And they're not just recycled lecture content, right? Like you had to escape a spaceship or something. So the activities are engaging. Now I've given away what I talk about at dinner parties, but now I'm going to give away what Olga's favorite topic is, which is tech debt. She can go on about it, so I will just kind of get Careen to flick her if needed. But it is a huge problem, and especially as there are more and more providers, it's difficult to get out of subscriptions, all of those sorts of things. So what do you mean with tech debt, and what should we be aware of?
So technical debt is a phrase that refers to redundant technology architecture in organizations that starts to create a problem where you can't basically operate your business. So think about if you have old versions of technology and they stop talking to other versions of technology in your business, that's technical debt, because your business stops running because you haven't kept up with how things are evolving in technology. So in large corporates, which is my background, this has started becoming a massive problem, especially in the world of enterprise resource planning software, so things like SAP, if you've heard of that, right? So these, the trauma, these are massive multi-million-dollar programs that run businesses, and I have witnessed personally businesses that have not been able to ship product for weeks because they weren't on top of the implications of not keeping up to date with how their business processes are evolving and how technology needs, their technology stack needs to move in line with those business processes. And why does this occur? This occurs, and this is a very blunt way of saying it, it occurs because software providers sell a dream. Leaders go, wow, this is going to solve all my problems. I don't need to think. And then they just put it into their business. That's why it happens. And no one sat there and go, why do we have this technology? How does it support our business processes? Which business processes does it support? Who owns this technology in our business? So at Oliver White, we go in and clean this up a lot, right? And so the lessons I'm going to give you from big enterprise into small business are, before you start adding this into your organization, first understand how you expect people to behave with technology, define the processes that you expect this technology to support, and if it's not supporting those processes effectively, what will you do? And then decide what technology you need to help you with that. Because AI might not be the right answer for every business problem you have. And you need a framework to help you work through that. So start with what you want people to be doing, understand the business processes that you're trying to enhance, and then think about, is AI the right solution? Is maybe an Excel spreadsheet the right solution? Then you will get clarity about what is needed. Otherwise, you'll just keep adding complexity like we talked about earlier, and at some point, things will grind to a halt and it will be very, very expensive because you have all this technology costing you lots of money and you don't know how to navigate it. So that's my little spiel on tech debt.
I will throw it straight back to you though, Olga, because one of the things that is really difficult to navigate is that you see big companies making huge investments and rolling things out, in my experience, also not particularly thoughtfully. But how are small businesses meant to compete and keep up? Because that capacity for investment and rollout is not always there. And as you say, it's really expensive to make the wrong call and get stuck. So how should we think about that dynamic?
So I just want to preface by saying, from a generative AI perspective, in large organizations, 95% of enterprise Gen AI deployments fail. So big organizations are not getting this right at an enterprise scale. So therefore, what you can take from that is, do not put the pressure on yourself that you're going to get a total business AI run solution, right? What you need to start looking at, going back to people, process, technology, and to JP's point earlier, what are the pain points? And get very specific about where AI can help. If you make it a one-stop shop for solving all your business problems, you will end up just like these big businesses. And I have seen millions of dollars thrown away by big business. However, in their mindset, they're like, well, that's just the cost of doing business. And for a small business, that's not an option, right? So being very clear on those use cases. So what we mean by use cases is problems or issues. And then having a mechanism to put the brakes on. If it's not working, you need to just let it go and move on to the next thing. Don't push and push and push and hope it will work, because you're actually just creating more drag in your business, and that's less time that you can spend marketing, getting sales, getting leads, all those important things, that the lifeblood of your business, generating cash, right? That's what's important for small business, not saying that they're doing something with AI, right? So that's my little kind of warning from a big business to small business. Thank you.
JP and Careen, I'm going to ask you, you can choose who goes first. What are the impacts, though, in businesses, in small to medium businesses around? Like, if you're scaling a company, who are you expecting to learn? How are you expecting them to integrate? We're not getting a full-on change management program and upskilling rollout and that sort of thing. Where do those impacts lie? I mean, I saw a job ad for somebody that needed like 8 years experience in prompt engineering for a product that's only been out for 2 years. Like, that companies are expecting a lot. What do individuals, what do businesses, what are the impacts across this?
So I think from my perspective, again, being a small business owner, it's really for a small business, who's going to own the change or who's going to own the technology. If you have somebody who's very excited about it and they're in a position of power, then absolutely allow them to be able to do that. And if that's yourself, then absolutely, that's fantastic. So that's from a process perspective. There's so many tools out there, right? Even when we talked about Google's got Gemini, OpenAI's got ChatGPT, we've got Microsoft Copilot, there's Claude, which is from Anthropic. So there's so many amazing generative AI models out there that you can use. It doesn't matter really the technology. They're all pretty much the same. Of course, they'll all tell you that they're not the same, but they're all generally going to give you the same thing, which is here's a huge amount of knowledge and here's what you might need, from it based upon what you're asking it. The key is, how does that interact with your business? How does that interact with your small business or your startup? So whether that's the head of IT or whether that's the operations person or whether it's your new grad who you hired who's super excited about it, but who's going to be with you longer term, okay, allow them to kind of run with it. And then you keep that human in the loop. I think, we were saying before, is you have that person who's ultimately responsible for the decisions that AI is coming up with. So that's really my key there, is that interaction between AI and people. Keep it human-centered, but have it AI-enabled. And that's how I try to run my business, and that's how I try to advise small businesses and startups go.
I like that answer. I might just go into one piece of that, which is the change management side. As a business, if you are thinking about implementing new technology, how do you bring people on the journey? Because if you don't bring everyone on the journey, you're probably going to get to the destination by yourself and nobody's going to be using the technology, and it's going to be really frustrating for everyone. So one thing that I've seen work really well is to build advocates within the business. So as JP said, you've got your one person who's super passionate, super excited, and they're going to lead that charge. But then it's to build the team around it. So the team who are experimenting, iterating, learning from what's working, what's not working. As Olga said, looking at those processes, working out where the technology can, really help amplify it. And then to test it as a group and to bring the organization with them as well. That I've seen that work really well on the change management side, which really helps with the adoption piece as well. One caveat to that as well is with leaders is to be really vulnerable. Like a lot of us are learning as we go in the technology space right now. So being really honest with the team and saying, I don't know the answer right now. I'm a bit scared of where it might end up, but let's do it together. Let's learn together. Let's iterate together. I've seen that be a really effective change management technique as well.
Thank you. There's one kind of quick little extra that I do want to talk about is the people side of things. Because, HR is one of the areas that, has that repetitive process. We have plenty of examples of how bias plays into it negatively, but how should an HR team be excited about integrating a technology that might replace them? I think that question about what to do with the humans is something that comes up in my work that, I don't do KPIs. We can have the number-based SMART goals, things that we're trying to achieve, but we don't want the people to behave like robots. We want the people to bring the people things and the robots to bring the robot things. So, when we're talking about key performance narratives, as in this is the vibe that we're going for, this is the key subjective thing that is either a yes or no, we did this, that process of desystematizing the human layer and pushing that into things that can be automated. How does that play out, though, in reality?
That's a big question, Kate. So I actually think that HR is one of the functions in a business that has the most potential to completely reinvent itself with AI, because HR is confusing, it's complex, it's costly, the law changes all the time. And as HR practitioners, we're the same as business owners. We have to learn the new legislation, we have to learn its application, we have to change all the policies constantly. So for us, we're so admin heavy as a function that's where AI really shines. And so if you take that admin off our plates, we suddenly have time for enablement, for coaching, for mentoring, for really robust hiring systems, for people experience, for development and performance. And so that becomes really exciting. I'm such a HR geek. I'm like, that's really exciting not to be sat behind a computer building letters for every meeting that I've just had, outlining what the actions and outcomes were. Like, that's just such a waste of time. And so from the HR perspective, I think AI gives us the power to concentrate on people, not paperwork. And I think that's one of its most powerful applications. We can actually become more human using the AI.
Thank you, Careen. So just to close out on the panel, I'd really like to get for everyone's one golden nugget of advice. What's the one top tip thing to be aware of? Olga, would you like to?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice is don't be overwhelmed. You know your business. AI does not know your business. So AI is a tool that you can use, right? And so we want to treat it as a tool, not a silver bullet. If it's not serving your business, replace it with something else. Yeah, so don't feel compelled to use it if it's not serving your business. Your goal is to grow your business, not to have AI in your business. That's my top tip.
That's a good one. Mine is to understand that AI hallucinates. And so you do have to check your outputs, and it can become really easy to start trusting everything that AI is giving you. I actually fell for it. So I was using ChatGPT, and it said, would you like me to send you that as an email? And I was like, yes. And I went away, made a cup of tea, and 3 hours later I didn't have an email because it didn't have the capability to do that. But it was so confident in saying, do you want me to send that as an email? I was like, yeah. So it's just, maintaining that awareness that it does hallucinate. It can be overconfident. And so checking that the outputs is really important.
I like that one too. I would say that my one tip, specifically when it comes to business owners, is to get curious, about it. So curious from a couple of ways. Number one, if you haven't implemented anything with AI, take one of these micro-credentialing courses, or show up to one of these meetups, or learn more about these technologies, and just have it in your pocket. Ask it questions. If you use Google right now, or you use some other search engine, try to use ChatGPT instead, or Gemini, and see how that might work. Take a course in prompt engineering. If you have already used it, and you're actually on the other side and you go, it's actually really not for me. It's a fun little thing. I would say really think about how it might solve actual business problems, and think of it as a PhD in your pocket. So you have somebody who's super smart, they know nothing about your business, but they have literally all the information in the world. But they just don't know any about you. So what do you need to feed it, and what do you need to teach it in order for it to know the best about your business, about your people, about your strategy, so it can take all of that amazing PhD knowledge and then apply it to making your business better, to leveling that up. And just short of that, Kate, it's really, I think all of us are going to be hanging out at the Human Ear kind of booth. So come have a chat. And I love talking about businesses, about technology, about growth. More than happy to have a very specific conversation about what your needs are and how we might be able to help.
Thank you. To Careen's point, I found that actually yelling at ChatGPT doesn't help. All caps doesn't improve the outputs. But it just wants to make me feel good. And so when it says, can I do this for you? And I say, can you actually do that? And it goes, no. And I'm like, oh, don't offer that. But setting up the questions, I have to remind myself that it has the intelligence of autocorrect, or the kind of the text autofill on my phone, and I never mean ducking. So remembering that, kind of phrase, and that's the intelligence that it's giving. But my number one tip, the children in my extended family have this really dreary line that anytime they want to do something, anytime we're slowing things down, they complain. And we say, what's my number one job? You know, to keep us safe. And it's just kind of remembering that in leadership is that you can get excited about things, you should explore things, you should be curious, but that hierarchy of needs around safety and security and keeping your people safe as well, and psychologically safe, and having those conversations that involve people to be invested in the future of your business and feel a part of it. That safety should underpin everything that we're doing in this space. So that's my number one thing.
Thank you, guys. I think we added one more H, hallucination, to this panel. Wonderful. Is anyone have any questions? Michael.
JP, when do you think AI will be able to reason, common sense reasoning, everyday reason? Apply common sense reasoning. Yeah, you.
Yeah, so this is the million-dollar question. AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, has been kind of I think OpenAI, which is the creators of ChatGPT, have said, oh, you know, we're going to have robots thinking for us, and they're going to be doing all of our things. It depends on what your definition is of reasoning. If you just ask it questions right now, it can answer 99% of those questions pretty much correct and what you need. But if it's going to ask you, and if you're going to want to know things around emotions, around the things to be around human, as Careen said, we need to keep humans in the loop. You can use technology to amplify our feelings, to amplify our knowledge, but you know, I'm not really a prognosticator, even though I'm a tech geek myself, and I'm really looking forward to finding out how these things progress. You know, since the 1950s with Alan Turing and the Turing test. So the Turing test is, can you talk to a piece of technology, and then after 10 minutes, can you figure out, is it human or not? And if it fools you enough, then it's passed the Turing test. Well, ChatGPT can probably do that already. If you think of, or am I talking to somebody across the world, or am I talking to a human being, or technology? But is that gonna pass your test, Michael? Of, is this my friend? Is this somebody who I'm going to be talking to, who's going to care about me in 10, 20 years? Is going to care about my family and going through disease and going through, you know, the things that I'm going through? I don't think so. But we've got, you know, 7 billion plus people in the world who are willing to fill that role, and technology is there for a particular piece.
Yeah, I think the concept of AGI underestimates the complexity of humanity. That if 70% of our communication is nonverbal, and that's, you know, the Zoom fatigue, COVID experience. The amount of context, the amount of information that we take in and respond to things, when you put it into AI, you are limited by what you can communicate with the AI and how well you do that. So there's more ambiguity and nuance that people can handle.
I think there's an important distinction that we need to make about consciousness and intelligence sometimes as well. So if you were to present to the people who came up with the term AI in the 1950s, ChatGPT, they'll be like, you've achieved it. That is AGI, right? The definition is so fluid. So as we're getting more and more output and we're seeing like hallucinations and that sort of thing, we're like, it's not quite there yet. But so this AGI is being spruiked a lot, but we need to really split out. What are we talking about? Are we talking about intelligence in terms of being able to answer questions, or are we talking about something that can, a digital version of a human, effectively, which has consciousness, so it understands connection and the ramifications of decisions and things like that? We're not there yet.
And just that, kind of to bring it back to business around what investments to make, what subscriptions, what products, that kind of thing, is that we can have lofty philosophical debates, but there are, you know, everyday factors that if you want to talk about those or any of those bigger picture questions, we could obviously talk all day. So please feel free to come and have a chat with us. We'll probably be over by the Red Bull car. But yes, thank you so much for having us, Wexpo.